Okay, Chapter 3, Navigating the New Interface for MicroStation and Modeling, or basically navigating the ORD software here. Navigating the interface, I will say. Alright, so let's go ahead and just get into one of those files that you had created earlier. I'm just going to open up this alignment file. And again, make sure that you were sitting, before you opened up that file, make sure you're still sitting in your work set, student number 1, because we do want that associated. And you know, the first time you get into it, or sometimes you will see this pop up here where it says it's not sure what workspace you want. So it does give you an opportunity at this point to go ahead and make sure that that file is associated to the proper work set. So student 1. So I'm going to select that, say open. And when the ORD software opens, you're going to notice that it looks very different initially anyway than Power Geopack. What you're probably going to notice is that it looks a lot like many of the new softwares that are out there, like Word or the new GIS Pro, Art Pro. Seems like all the softwares are going with this. They have this same look. In many cases, we're using the same exact tools, but they seem to like to use this format. So let's see what that format is anyway. And I do have a few other tools out already. Maybe I should take those out for now, because you're probably not seeing all these extra tools that I open later, and I'll show you how you can do that on yours as well. I'm just undocking and closing many of the toolboxes, but okay. So let's go about it this way. Before we look at the tabs, let's look at, I'm not sure what Bentley even calls this. It's like the, I should look that up. It's the main type of work that you're doing. In any case, the vast majority of the time, if you're a designer, you're going to be working in most likely this one, Open Roads Modeling. If you are working, if you're a surveyor, you're going to be working in the survey section. But you'll see what happens is when we select these, I'll select surveys, and what Bentley did for us is they tried to put together all the tools that a surveyor would typically use and get rid of everything else. So what you're going to find with this new interface is that if you want to use that, whatever that tool is, draw a line, probably most any workflow would be drawing a line. So somewhere, you're probably going to have place line, for instance. So what you're going to see is that there's multiple locations to go to that same tool. In fact, something that's brand new to ORD that I love, and that's in the upper right hand corner, it has a search. So if you're not even sure where to find some tool, and mostly what it's called, or a word within the name of that tool, I just said place line. So I start to type in place line, and it should find place line. And there it is. I don't know why it's not the first pick, but it's right there. So if I hover over place line, it's going to show me all the different locations that I could go to find the place line tool, or it's going to open it up right from this location. And that's what you end up doing the vast majority of the time, is I just click on place line and I'm right there. Or I type in cell. It's like, okay, I'm new to the software, I don't know exactly where it's at. I just come up here, I find it, I hover over it, I click on it, and it opens up the cell library. So I think you're going to find that to be super useful. Although you probably don't want to use it all the time. Eventually you're going to want to figure out where all these tools are located. But as a designer, the vast majority of the time you're probably only going to be really using the two, I would say. Open roads modeling, you'll use that the most. And then anytime you're adding any underground utilities of any kind, you're modeling the underground utilities, which is required for that utility to show up on the cross sections. You're going to be in the drainage and utilities tab. So let's go back though to the open roads modeling, because really, like I said, you're going to be here 99% of the time. And let's take a look to see how this is broken down. You've got your well, let's start at the very beginning. Let's go to File. And this probably, again, this looks a lot like many of the other softwares. And say settings, for instance. Like I'm sure as a user, you probably use user preferences quite a bit. Well, it's no longer located where it used to be, where you're used to it. But you just go here, you go to settings. It's pretty intuitive. And then look under settings, you've got is that setting that you're looking at changing, is that specific to you, the user, or is that based on a particular file that you're working on, or the IDOT configuration? Probably user for you is going to be the one that you're most commonly going to be changing some setting that it's just for you. You, as a user, it applies to all files that you're in. It's if you're logged on as you, this is where you make that change. So I'm going to go user, most common one probably, preferences, and then it opens the dialog, and this is it's the exact same. This is totally what you are used to seeing. There might be small differences, like for instance, and I like this one, under operation, this is where you said if you wanted to open up one or two windows. Well, if you're using ORD now and you have multiple monitors, you can actually have up to 4 monitors, which is pretty nice. Or if you just untoggle that altogether, then you'll just have the one. And for training purposes, I'm just using one. Most of the time I work within 2 windows is more common. But there's all the other options that you used in the past. And there's that one that was so important when we first switched to that new text. You could never see it, and you always had to come here to View Options and turn off this anti-alias text, and then it made your text brighter on the screen so you could see it, that sort of thing. Okay. Also, here's one I find myself using. I probably need to get this set up a little differently too, is function keys. One way, if you're using the IDOT function keys, it's just kind of like a quick way of taking some action. Like probably the most common one that I use is F4. It clears your selection set, but in order for that to work, you need to be pointing to that ID or IDOT function menu. I hit save, and then when I go back in my file, of course, if I have selected something, multiple items, whatever that may be, then I could hit F4. It clears that selection set. But of course, the other way is that if you're in this mode here of new, if I just left click off to the side, it's also going to clear the selection set. So a couple ways of doing that, but there's the function key menu. That's pretty handy, but you may have to go to settings, function key, and point to it. Another one that you're probably going to use is toolboxes. So, because what you might find that you're not crazy initially, at first anyway, about this new, the new navigation, and you're like, hey, I just want my toolbox back. I want to bring up just all my text tools. I want to see them all. I don't want to go digging for all this stuff. And I can click there, and it's going to bring up that text toolbox that you were used to seeing, in past versions of the software. If you wanted to, if you're doing a lot of text work, you brought this up, you docked it, you went to the list, you turned off the ones that that you don't use, and you still do have the ability to do all those kinds of things. In fact, something that Bentley did not do initially with this navigation was they didn't have the task as we're used to it from for all the basic drafting in Power Geopack. And so I'll show you where that's at. Again, this is, if you're not crazy about this new method of getting to the same tools, you can go over here to that, see that little vert V8, and now they've got 4 different options. Probably the one that I use the most. Let me click. Sometimes you have to click a different one first. I'm going to click Dialogue, and there is going to bring up that task that I was so used to using. You may or may not have used it. I actually kind of liked it. I found it to be a very quick way of getting to the tools that were all shown. Sometimes, with the new ones, what it does, it's set up, and you can change these defaults, but it might say, well, if it's a placement tool, you're most likely going to be using place line or this or that, but it may be a case where you're like, well, I place text along a lot, and that's something that you end up having to go through 3 steps to get to to use that. And I think the reason why they probably went to that new method instead of the old, like the task on the side, because now there's multiple ways of getting to the same text. And I'll show you another one that you may like, and that's if you hit the space bar and you get this pop up here. I can hover it over. It says these are my manipulate tools, and then it kind of gives you this on the fly, so you're not really moving your head. You're still facing in the same location on the screen. Move. So that's kind of nice in a way, because you're not looking all over your screen to try to find that tool. You just go spacebar, delete, or spacebar, whatever it is. It's basically all the same stuff that you can get to many other ways, but that's just one other way. There's, again, I said in this class I'm not going to try to show you every way of doing something the same, but I think that is a good one to know as it pertains to navigation. Now, as far as the most common tabs that you're probably going to use, probably this home. These are pretty common. These got, we'll get into this will be way later in the class, talking about analyzing the model, creating corridor reports. This is, that's all a little bit later. But it's got it broken down, kind of like the way tasks were before, but instead of having the civil task, now pretty much everything's in this pull down. So I've got, anytime I'm working with the terrain, I click the terrain tab and I see all the terrain type tools here. Same with geometry. Site, that's if you're doing a development work, which most likely you're probably not doing too much of that. So in that, I'm not really going to get into site. I'll tell you what site is some other time. Okay, but this is going to be one of the most common ones that use corridor, and we're going to talk about creating templates, and so you can see when you click that at the top, that particular tab, it's going to just show you all the tools that pertain to that subject, I guess you could say. Drawing production, drawing, and here and with the drawing tools, you're going to find a lot of the same in the task, that sort of thing. Probably the last thing I want to show you as far as navigation is up at the top. Like you're probably not seeing the same tools I am up here. There's one thing when I first switched to this that made me crazy, that to think that if I wanted to find a tool, I had to go through all these steps to get to it, because maybe I want place line, and I was working under say terrain, and there's Bentley put out all the tools it thought I would need, but in place line is not one of them, so you would have to bounce around and get to that place line tool. Well, if you find that you always want to get to place line, without having to hit the space bar, without searching for it, without going to task. It's always just right in front of you. You want to add your most common tools to this quick bar up here. And so I'm going to click that drop down button. I'm going to say customize quick access toolbar. And then here is where, reference. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You're always going to references. So I wanted references to be up there. So you get a list of all the potential tools that are available. You can select it, add it in, hit close, and then when you do, you will see up at the very top all those super common tools that you use all the time that you want to see. And that's, like I said, that's a user preference. That's specific to you as a user. You're always going to see, the same thing. Okay. We could go on and on about the interface, but that is just a real quick overview. So we are going to leave it at that and wrap up Chapter 3.